Tom, welcome to the OTT Red Spotlight podcast, buddy.
Thanks so much, Chris. Good to be here.
You're passing through Dubai.
Yeah.
I've managed to grab you for half an hour and drag you out to Silicon Oasis, to Studio Red. Thanks for coming, and I hope you've had a good trip. And I'm really looking forward to listening to someone who, for me, is the subject matter expert when it comes to retention, talking about the streaming industry, some of the background you've got, particularly with DAZN.
Yeah.
But then also what you're experiencing in terms of the type of organizations and the type of sectors that are turning to you for your expertise.
Yeah, sure.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. Traditionally, this is where these podcasts start off, so that anyone listening or watching gets a feeling for who you are and where you've come from. Let's just do a high-level whistle-stop tour of the kind of organizations you've worked at, Tom.
Yeah, sure. So 25, 26 years in retention. 26 now, actually.
You can admit it.
Yeah, I got to admit it. So I spent first 5 years of my career in telcos as an analyst. I then moved into agency and spent 11 years in agency, 7 of which I was global CRM director at a big publicist agency group. They were the agency was a big design and build shop, built websites for like Lloyds Banking Group and Virgin Atlantic, and I helped to grow the CRM proposition as a service extension. And I was working with the MDs of all of our offices to sell and deliver CRM strategy services for likes of Coca-Cola, Volvo, IKEA around the world. And then we won a lot of work out here in the Middle East, actually. So I came out here in 2013 working with the likes of Altair and ADDC and Johnson & Johnson and MasterCard. And spent 3 years at Dubai. Then I was approached to join Manchester United as head of CRM and head of marketing. It's always a point of debate working at Man United. Like, am I a fan? No, I'm not a fan. So I'm an Aston Villa fan.
Yep.
So yeah, but that was a really interesting time. It was just a few years after Fergie, and very much a heavy focus on fan monetization and driving engagement and repeat transactions with the brand, with the club. After that, I went back to telco. Spent 2 years as head of customer marketing at TalkTalk, and then my last client side role was I spent 3 years as senior vice president of retention at DAZN. And I was responsible for CRM marketing, MarTech. We had CRM teams in all individual markets, so heads of CRM in those markets. I was responsible for customer value management, elements of the contact center, working closely with the product teams and a business owner for certain elements of the product as well. So yeah, like Exco minus one role, interesting time. And then more recently, set up the retention coach. So set that up in January 24. Have a newsletter, about 2,000 subscribers. I send a weekly digest, about 800 to 1,000 words every week about retention to that audience. I am quite active on LinkedIn, and since I set up the business, worked with about six clients in multiple different sectors. Some subscription, some more with recurring revenue, some outside of subscription. But yeah,
what's your opinion on the level of maturity that generally exists with all these clients? You've worked with some massive brands, and now you're running your own organization. When you walk through the door and start to do your calibration exercise on whether or not they really understand what retention is, what's your intuition telling you?
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends a lot on the organization. I think like there's certain sectors, and I think, coming from a telco background, like start my career and also time at TalkTalk, telcos are very much focused on retention, right? You see that and you know yourself, right? From your experience as well, right?
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. Look, the brand elevation that this podcast over the last 5 seasons has brought for OTT Red, my brand, and in this season, sponsors as well, is something that I want to make available to you. If you're enjoying this podcast and you'd like to get this section of the next season to elevate your own brand, then please reach out to me.
But they don't always do it in the best way, right? So think about kind of making it really difficult to cancel, or the way in which they approach kind of management of kind of contract renewal. But what does give you, if you have experience in that space, is an understanding of the drivers. And when you're working to other organizations, you can quite often see kind of responsibility for retention sitting with just the CRM team, so they're given the responsibility for a business KPI, but they don't necessarily have control over it, because retention is not just as a result of like the CRM marketing initiatives, push notifications, email marketing, or even in product experience that you share with the customer. The retention is the result of the the overarching customer experience, all the interactions you have with the contact center, key elements of the product, and CRM marketing in combination. So, but quite often I see organizations that don't really have that nailed down, right? They don't really understand that it's all of those components that drives the commercial outcome. And, as I said, the responsibility can sometimes be left to the CRM marketing team, where they don't have the ability to control all of the dimensions of what drives retention ultimately.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. Look, the brand elevation that this podcast over the last 5 seasons has brought for OTT Red, my brand, and in this season, sponsors as well, is something that I want to make available to you. If you're enjoying this podcast and you'd like to get this section of the next season to elevate your own brand, then please reach out to me. I'm going to be honest with you, Tom, about what I think exists in a lot of organizations, even ones that I've worked in, when it comes to how seriously they treat retention. They want to stop churn, no doubt about that. But when it comes to how forensic and applied they've been on understanding their methodology, what they do, when they do it, the customer journey, it's just so fragmented.
100%. Totally agree with that. Yeah. Very fragmented. I think, a lot of organizations are, as I said, kind of putting all of the emphasis on CRM marketing, but they're not considering the kind of complete experience. And what I talk about, like the quarter of a century that I've spent in retention has taught me is that actually it is about all of those different components of the experience. It's about the in-product experience. It's about the contact center experience. It's about the CRM marketing experience. It's about all of those elements, but it's not about everything, right? So there's key moments in the relationship that can make or break retention. So what I call moments of truth. It's not something I invented. It's something that's in the industry. But a moment of truth is a moment that will make or break retention. So I worked with a gym brand earlier this year, and the kind of example of a positive moment of truth is, say you're kind of new to the gym space. For example, you just decided you want to start working out, you want to lose a bit of weight, or you want to look good for summer, or whatever it may be. Yeah. But you've never really been to the sort of person that goes to a gym. Yeah. Like it can be quite intimidating when you first walk into a gym. So how do you kind of proactively, positively impact that moment of truth? You can support customers with a workout plan ahead of the visit. You can arrange like small group workouts with personal trainers, teach the customer how to do a bench press or how to operate the step machine, right? And CRM marketing can play a role in preparing for that moment, but it's also very important that the products and service is all integrated around that experience. And then on the other side of it, like there's negative moments of truth that can really like damage the relationship long term and really mean like customers who are like very loyal actually suddenly kind of detract and move away from the brand. And I think one of the best examples of a brand that is really, really smart about those negative moments of truth would be Amazon, right? And Amazon's used in many different contexts, but Jeff has always said like start with the customer, and he's spot on. But if you ever have a problem with Amazon, like Amazon delivery, like you contact them and it will be resolved like that. And when you're on a chat, or if you have to speak to them on the phone, there's no questions asked. You'll get a refund no matter what, right? And then after that, you kind of the way in which you feel about the brand is improved, right? Because if you have a bad experience but it's handled really, really well, then actually that's kind of unusual, because many brands don't handle bad experiences well. And so those two aspects, like that supporting customers having much better positive moments of truth and then mitigating negative moments of truth are critical to retention. And what the mistake that I see a lot of brands make, and I've seen this for years across many industries, is like excessive focus on customer experience, but not real clarity on where to focus those efforts. And so it's about like, we've got this massive project and we have to optimize every aspect of the experience and spend a ton of money on technology or teams and then see no real movement in the P&L because you're overspent on initiatives that are not necessarily going to drive the outcome, because actually they don't always matter to customers, right? So I always advocate to really identify those moments in the relationship that make or break the experience and make or break retention, and then double down on ensuring that they are really optimized to drive the best outcomes for customers, because that's what matters to customers.
Yeah, absolutely. What you've just said makes absolute sense, Tom. And it makes me wonder about what your methodology is. I'm not asking you to give away any of your IP, in running your business, but, Are there stages that you can talk about at a high level where you're able to go in as the doctor of retention and diagnose what's happening in a business really quickly?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it comes with like having done this for so long, right, and having so much experience in the sector. But the process is very much about understanding the data, understanding what are the behaviors that happen before customer churns, right? So what are the interactions? So quite often brands will build a churn model, but I'm really not a fan of churn models because often it's too late. You don't see, like when you start to, if you build a churn model, you predict someone is going to leave, and then you go out to them, what are you going to really do? Give them a discount to stay. And then and many people who have seen this, when you do that kind of discount, you've got, obviously it's in a prediction, you'll find that the people that take that discount were the ones that weren't going to churn. And when you measure against your control group, you go like, there's no uplift off this activity. So it's not actually about the churn model, but it's about using the insights from the churn model to understand what are the moments that led up to that experience, and then go back to those early warning signs and fix those moments. So for example, going into the gym, people are lost, don't know what to do if they're a certain persona or profile. Help them to make sure that first moment, that first interaction is really good. Or you look back and go, okay, we had say in the gambling sector, we had a problem with settlement around a bet that a customer had. But how do we resolve that for the future? Because, at the end of the day, like giving customer 10 quid back because they thought they bet on 3 yellow cards in a game, but the terms and conditions in the fine print said, oh, one of them can't be after 90 minutes. Just give the customer the money back if they can play any. And if you do that, they'll feel much more inclined to continue to be a customer of yours rather than sticking to your policies and rules. So it's really about kind of understanding that detail and what are those drivers that lead to those negative interactions. Yeah, I mean, it's not always immediate. You don't go in and understand exactly what's happening straight away. But there is like an audit process that I go through to help clients to understand what the pain points are that are leading to churn, and then optimizing those moments in the way that as fast as possible to support the client's objectives.
Now, clearly, the question I'm about to ask you is dependent on the nature of the sector that the company exists within.
Yeah.
But in your opinion, Tom, is it the product or the experience that is usually the driver of somebody becoming a churn statistic?
Yeah, I mean, the product is absolutely fundamental. So, in my work, I talk about the retention hierarchy of needs, right? So, at the foundation is the product experience. So, like, there's got to be a good customer product fit. So, like, taking DAZN, for example, you have to be interested in sports to want to take a DAZN subscription. So, there has to be that fit there. In the middle, actually, related to that kind of product customer fit is acquisition. So, quite often, a solution to a retention problem is to funnel more money into acquisition, because it's all about like the total number of subscribers that you have. But if you invest a lot in acquiring offer hungry customers, they're not going to stick around very long, right? If you got like big jumps in pricing from your discount price and this is a kind of something that you see a lot in the publishing industry, where they have big drop offs after kind of a one pound a month subscription that then suddenly goes up to £30. And then so it's also about acquisition. Who you acquire will also drive the likelihood that they'll be retained, and that relates back to the product customer fit. And then at the top of the hierarchy is those moments. So if you've got that product customer fit, like for example, I use a personal example. There's a jeans brand that I love. This is the only brand that I would buy jeans from, but I had a really crap experience. I posted about it on LinkedIn. I had a really crap experience with them when I bought a pair of jeans I changed my mind about. The shop had an incident on Oxford Street in London, Regent Street in London, and they wouldn't accept them back at the retail store. So because the store was shut, right, because there was a fire, they wouldn't accept them back online, and so I ended up like in this kind of loop where I couldn't actually return the product, right? And I was a massive fan of that that company as a brand because of the product. But that was a moment of truth with me and that relationship with that brand. And I still haven't been able to return the jeans because I haven't been to London since the shops opened. And my feeling towards that brand has completely changed, because it is about how customers feel about the association with the product. So if you can have that product customer fit, you acquire the right types of customers. Still, if you don't get those moments right, then you can have a churn problem. And so that's why it's really, really important to focus on that.
What about, and how do you embed hard code the kind of lessons that people who are interfacing with the customers need to know about in the psychology of the type of interactions they're having with customers? Is it an intensive education that people who are on the phone or speaking to customers need, or is it as simple as whatever the customer says, just make sure they're delighted?
Yeah, I mean, look, the latter, there's a little bit of the latter. It's not always about customer service as well. Like, it's also about kind of friction within your product experience or the way in which you manage like communications relationships as well. Like CRM is absolutely a part of the way in which you manage interactions with customers and drive retention. And the way I work and the way I work with my clients is to identify what those moments of truth are and then focus on those moments, right? You don't need to focus on everything. You don't need to change policy across the organization. Just focus on those particular interactions. Like, in the Amazon example I used, like, if a customer does have a problem, you need to find a way to fix it. And it's not always about contact center staff's interaction with customers. It can also be about like policies and process. Because in that jeans example I used, it was because it's a different entity and they're like a franchise. But like, really, the brand should actually care that the store is shut and I want to return a product. They're not cheap jeans, right? So, they should have worked that out, but they hadn't, right? So it's process, it's people, it's technology, and it's also the way in which you interact with the customer.
Do you find that when companies turn to you and want to pick on your subject matter expertise, that they mostly focus on talking to you about moments after the product has been purchased? And do you ever think about the experience pre-purchase? Are the two?
Yeah, 100%, like very much aligned, right? Like, so onboarding starts before you make the transaction, and onboarding is your biggest retention moment, particularly in subscription. If lots of brands in the subscription sector will look at churn as an average across the base, but you really, really need to look at it from a tenure perspective, because almost always you'll find much greater churn as a proportion of the base in the first 30 days to 90 days to the relationship. And therefore, it's really, really important in those first moments when the customer subscribes to the service, you help them to get the most that they can out of service. And there's a few key things that it's worthwhile considering that can seem somewhat counterintuitive to some people, but really, really important. So firstly is they want to hear from you. So just because they bought, it's not the end of the relationship. That's the start of the relationship. They've signed the contract. They don't want you to go quiet on them. They want to learn how to get the best out of your product and your service, particularly at OTT or in publishing. So high frequent interactions with the customer and guidance on how you can support them achieve their end goals. Absolutely critical. Also in that early life period, get the customer to a result fast. Get them a benefit, like understand what they came for. So in B2B SaaS, maybe there's a accounting software with different personas, like maybe one's come to the software to manage payroll, one is like a solo freelancer. Like, how do you help them to get their outcomes as quickly as possible? And it's often not about like boring product tutorials and no one wants to do that, right? But you need to understand how to get them to a benefit and how to get them to what they want to get out of your product as soon as possible. And I always, the moments of truth are absolutely fundamental, but really those first early days in subscription are like absolutely critical for subscription brands.
You just mentioned OTT, and a lot of the people that will be listening to or watching this will be from that sector.
Yeah.
Because that's where I live and operate. If there were nuances, distinctions, characteristics, and you can speak about this with credibility because of your years with DAZN.
Yeah.
What are the peculiarities that people in those sort of OTT organizations should have in mind when it comes to this topic of retention?
Yeah, look, I mean, like onboarding, as I said, is absolutely critical in OTT, right? Helping customers to get where they need to go and getting them to get the most out of the service as quickly as possible. I think one of the things that kind of Netflix have done so well is personalization, right? You'll know, right? 80% of content consumption on Netflix is off the back of a recommendation. Like so Spotify, there's been many like Tidal, many different streaming brands that have come and gone, right? Trying to take Spotify's place. And their brilliance is in personalization, and it's almost become a cliche to talk about Spotify Wrap, but it is such an amazing example of personalization, right? So yeah, from an OTT perspective, I think early life personalization, helping customers. Again, it's about helping customers to get the result that they came for, right? So, if you're an Inter Milan fan, we need to know that so that we can tell you when the Inter Milan games are on, when the highlights are available, when the interview with the star players available, and so that is absolutely critical.
Okay. Final question.
Yes.
You mentioned personalization. How much do you think AI is affecting personalization?
Yeah, I think. Look, I mean, there's a lot going to happen with that, right? It's rising in importance. So I think I'm not going to be alone in saying we're on a cusp of a huge technological transformation, right? I read something today actually. We could be in a position very soon where we're kind of getting 20,000 years of scientific development in the space of a week, right? So the rate of progress and change is absolutely astounding and amazing that we're about to see. And I think over the next 5 years, particularly in this space as well, like you're thinking about product experiences that learn on the fly and serve content based on how you're interacting. There's not all this, making rules or building models, all of it happening agentically, sending customers on unique journeys within the products and within CRM marketing according to their specific profiles. Identifying proactively before customers even know they're going to have a problem, that they've got a problem. But all of that stuff requires setup, requires the thinking, and therefore, AI will be a self-learning machine. But in order to kind of enable that, you need to start with the foundation. You need to start with the strategic foundations in order to enable the AI to start on the right path effectively, right? So rather than start from scratch. So I think it's a very exciting time. I think there's a lot of people been talking about AI taking their jobs and stuff like that, but I actually feel like we're going to see so much progress that it's actually a really exciting time for people who work in strategy and creativity and like what the end product experience will be. And it's quite an exciting time for human race. We just got to get the governance right.
It's interesting what you say about knowing the process, especially when it comes to AI and predictive behaviors, churn behaviors, because how can you predict something if you don't know what the heartbeat of the process is in the first place?
Yeah, exactly right.
Tom, I know we've spoken about potentially doing some stuff for the OTT Red community later on in the year. We'll see how the next few months go, how your business blossoms, all that sort of stuff. I really hope that might be the case.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and giving me this 20-minute boot camp when it comes to retention, and wish you all the best of luck with the business.
Thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, great to be here. And definitely love to do something later in the year.
Thanks, mate.